Donald Trump just walked into the NATO summit like he owned the place, and in a way, he did. Before the first handshake, he'd already leaked a private message from NATO's new chief calling him the only American president in decades to force Europe to pay in a big way. Within hours, the entire summit shifted. What was supposed to be a routine display of unity became something else entirely. Trump demanding billions, Ukraine quietly getting sidelined, and allies scrambling to keep up with the chaos. Then came the Iran strike, a sudden ceasefire, and Trump's message to NATO: you're either with me or you're paying for it. This wasn't just another summit. It was Trump rewriting the rules of global power. And what happened behind closed doors may have permanently changed NATO's future. Trump didn't just arrive at the NATO summit. He made an entrance designed to dominate headlines. Hours before Air Force One even touched down in the Netherlands, he posted a screenshot of a private message from NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. The message wasn't subtle. "Donald, you have driven us to a really, really important moment for America and Europe and the world," it read. "You will achieve something no American president in decades could get done." Rutte even added, "Europe is going to pay in a big way, and it will be your win." That message was never meant to go public. But Trump didn't care. He shared it anyway, instantly flipping the summit's tone from diplomacy to domination. And when asked about the leak, Rutte didn't flinch. "I have absolutely no problem with that," he said. No denial, no backtracking. Just open acknowledgement that Trump was the reason NATO was about to change its course. By the time Trump's motorcade rolled in, it was already clear. This wasn't going to be about shared values or transatlantic unity. It was going to be about Trump reshaping the alliance in his image and daring anyone to stop him. But his next move would shake the alliance even harder. Trump wasted no time dropping his bombshell demand. Every NATO country must commit 5% of their GDP to defense, not in theory, in full. That's more than double the long-standing 2% target most allies already struggle to meet. To Trump, this wasn't a suggestion, it was a declaration, and surprisingly, some of Europe's biggest powers didn't resist. Britain, France, Germany, and the Netherlands all nodded yes. Mark Rutte backed the move, telling leaders that defense industries couldn't scale production without hard guarantees, not promises, not pledges, commitments. But not everyone was on board. Spain called the demand unreasonable, warning it would strain their economy. Slovakia said it reserves the right to decide how it'll meet the target. Trump didn't hold back. "There's a problem with Spain," he told reporters. "They're not agreeing, which is very unfair to the rest of them, frankly." The pressure campaign worked, or maybe it just bulldozed the usual consensus politics NATO relies on, because by day's end, the 5% demand wasn't just on the table. It was being framed as the new standard. What started as a U.S. push was quickly becoming a Trump doctrine, backed by America's closest allies. And while the alliance scrambled to recalibrate, another key player was watching from the sidelines, and they weren't happy, because Ukraine, once the face of NATO's fight for freedom, was about to be left out of the picture. For the last 3 years, Ukraine had been NATO's rallying cry. Every summit since Russia's 2022 invasion had centered on President Zelensky, his leadership, and his country's irreversible path to NATO membership. But this time, Ukraine was barely in the room. There was no Ukraine NATO Council, no primetime speech from Zelensky, and no grand declaration of support. In fact, when Zelensky arrived in The Hague, his first meeting wasn't even with NATO. It was across the street, in the Dutch Prime Minister's residence. And neither leader even mentioned NATO during their brief remarks. The message was clear. Ukraine was no longer at the heart of NATO's agenda. Even more striking, the U.S. hasn't made a single new public pledge to Ukraine since Trump returned to office 6 months ago. The silence is deafening. Instead, Zelensky was forced to pitch European leaders directly, asking them for help building Ukraine's own defense industry. Radar systems, drone production, ammunition, not from the U.S., but from the Netherlands. And while Ukraine still technically sits at the alliance's table, its future within NATO put on ice. Trump's administration has quietly frozen the fast-track membership talk. There's no new timeline, no new promises. Zelensky warned that Putin's ambitions go far beyond Ukraine. But inside NATO's walls, it seemed no one was listening. And outside those walls, something even bigger was pulling attention away. Just as NATO leaders gathered to talk Europe's defense, Trump dropped a geopolitical bomb, and not just metaphorically. Days before the summit, Trump ordered precision strikes on 3 Iranian nuclear enrichment sites, claiming it would cripple Tehran's ambitions. Then, in a stunning twist, he announced a complete and total ceasefire between Iran and Israel. It caught nearly everyone off guard, including his own allies. Suddenly, the summit's spotlight shifted. The world's eyes, once locked on Ukraine, were now fixed on the Middle East. The timing wasn't just dramatic, it was strategic. Trump used the Iran ceasefire to reposition himself as the global deal-maker, the one man who could stop wars while demanding the world pay up. It played straight into his narrative, bold, unpredictable, and headline-stealing. NATO, meanwhile, was caught in a juggling act. Could it deal with 2 crises at once? Rutte insisted yes. If we can't manage both the Middle East and Ukraine, we shouldn't be in the politics and military business at all, he told reporters. But privately, officials admitted the alliance was struggling to keep both tracks moving. For Ukraine, the optics were devastating. What used to be the center of NATO's moral mission now looked like a background story. And while Europe scrambled to keep up, Trump's next move would blur the line between diplomacy and political muscle, pushing his 5% demand harder than ever. But was this really about defense, or something much more calculated? To Trump, NATO wasn't broken, it was just badly run, and in his eyes, the fix was simple. Europe needs to stop freeloading and start paying. But behind the tough talk was a question that divided the summit. Was this 5% demand really about defense, or was it political theater? Trump's ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker, made it crystal clear. This isn't a pledge, it's a commitment. We want to see budgets, timelines, production schedules, all of it. This wasn't posturing. The U.S. wanted receipts. Whitaker even warned that NATO's defense industries must outpace Russia, not eventually, but now. We have no choice, he said. Let me be clear, the time is now. Rutte took it a step further. He called for an additional 1.5% of GDP to be spent on military infrastructure, roads, ports, airfields, not just weapons, but the logistics to move them fast in a crisis. But the push raised alarms. Some economists warned that such aggressive spending could cannibalize domestic budgets, especially for smaller nations still recovering from inflation and the energy crisis. And for countries like Spain, Portugal, and Italy, who haven't even hit 2% yet, the pressure felt like a financial squeeze play. Critics asked, was Trump setting a new global standard for collective defense, or just pushing European governments into a corner ahead of an election year? Whatever the truth, the effect was undeniable. Trump had flipped the power dynamic. Europe was on defense, and the U.S. was demanding answers. And while budgets and numbers dominated headlines, the silence around Ukraine's future grew even louder. At last year's NATO summit, Ukraine was front and center. The alliance's official statement promised long-term support, fast-track security guarantees, and a bold line. Ukraine is on an irreversible path to NATO membership. This year, that line vanished. No new promises, no updated roadmap, and no sign of urgency. Ukraine's NATO future had gone cold, fast. It wasn't just symbolic. Zelensky, once the emotional core of NATO's mission, was now left out of key meetings. And the usual NATO-Ukraine Council, quietly canceled. Even when he met top EU officials in The Hague, there was barely a whisper about NATO. Behind the scenes, Trump's administration had made its position clear. No more talk of Ukraine joining NATO anytime soon. No timeline, no guarantees. The alliance's tone had shifted from momentum to management. A strategic pause dressed up as pragmatism. And for Ukraine, the consequences were brutal. Without full NATO backing, the country was left to patch together support piece by piece. Zelensky used his meetings to beg for investment in Ukraine's own defense factories, offering cheap, fast weapon production in exchange for long-term survival. But the message was hard to miss. The West was moving on, or at least moving Ukraine out of the spotlight. Zelensky didn't hide his frustration. Putin's goals go far beyond Ukraine, he warned. We must stop him now. But at this summit, the louder voice belonged to Trump. And Ukraine was no longer the alliance's moral centerpiece. What happened next made that reality even clearer. Because in one final move, Trump reminded the world exactly who was in control. This summit was supposed to be about unity, shared responsibility, and modernizing NATO for a new era. Instead, it became a showcase of Trump's grip on the alliance and how far other leaders were willing to go to avoid a fight. It was impossible not to notice. From leaked private messages to last-minute summit pivots, Trump didn't just participate, he set the agenda. He redefined the tone, the demands, and even the talking points. Other leaders scrambled to adjust. The press followed his every word. Diplomats whispered off-record that this summit wasn't NATO-led, it was Trump-managed. The contrast to past years couldn't have been starker. In 2018, his clashes with NATO nearly tore the summit apart. He stormed out of meetings, threatened to pull the U.S. out entirely, and accused allies of using American protection like a free lunch. This time, he didn't threaten to leave. He didn't have to. Instead, he arrived with a list of demands, and most of the alliance fell in line. France, Germany, Britain, all nodding to the 5% target. Some resisted, sure, but the direction was clear. Trump wasn't asking anymore. He was calling the shots. And in the background, Ukraine, once the emotional rallying point, had been quietly pushed aside. Defense spending was the new obsession, and Trump's ability to bend NATO to his will was the new story. The question now wasn't whether Trump was back. That was obvious. The question was, is NATO still the world's most powerful alliance? Or just a stage for Trump's next move? Trump didn't just attend this NATO summit, he reshaped it. He forced Europe to commit to paying more than ever before, turning decades of alliance politics upside down. The 5% defense spending demand wasn't just a number, it was a statement. America's patience has limits, and Trump is ready to make allies pay. Meanwhile, Ukraine, the heart of NATO's fight against Russian aggression, was quietly pushed to the sidelines. No new promises, no fast-track membership, and no fresh military aid announcements. The alliance's moral mission seemed to fade beneath Trump's power play. So what does this mean for NATO? Is it still a united front against global threats, or a fractured alliance reshaped by one man's ambitions? One thing's clear, Trump's return to the world stage isn't just a political comeback. It's a bold rewriting of international relations. Europe will pay more, Ukraine waits in the wings, and NATO's future is uncertain. As the dust settles, one question remains. Is this the dawn of a stronger alliance, or the beginning of its unraveling? Let us know what you think down in the comments below. For more political news, celebrity scandals, and more, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to Now Famous Feed. Your support means the world to us. Thank you.